A cowboy came searching for milk. Apache woman became the mother he needed. The sun was still low in the sky when the cowboy stepped out of his small wooden cabin. Morning light touched the dry land, turning the dust golden, but it did nothing to ease the heaviness in his chest. The wind moved slowly, as if even it was tired of this lonely place. Inside the cabin, wrapped in a thin blanket, a baby slept restlessly. The child's breathing was soft, weak, and uneven. The cowboy stood at the door for a moment, listening, making sure the baby was still alive. Every morning he did this. Every morning fear sat in his heart like a stone. It had been 3 months since the child's mother had passed away. 3 long months of quiet nights, loud thoughts, and endless worry. The cowboy had never planned to raise a child alone. He had never planned to lose the woman he loved. Life on the land had always been hard, but now it felt cruel. The baby needed milk, and the little supply he had saved was gone. The cow he once owned had died in the winter, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't make the baby drink anything else. Each day the child grew weaker, and each night the cowboy prayed for a miracle. That morning he made a decision. He would ride out and find milk, no matter how far he had to go. He saddled his horse slowly, his hands rough and tired. The horse, old but loyal, watched him quietly, as if it understood the importance of the journey. The cowboy tied a small bag to the saddle and placed his last piece of bread inside. He looked back at the cabin once more. The baby stirred and let out a soft cry. That sound cut through him like a blade. He promised aloud, even though no one was listening, that he would come back. He always came back. The ride was long and silent. The land stretched wide and empty, with dry grass and scattered stones as far as the eye could see. The sun climbed higher, and the heat began to press down on him. Dust rose with every step the horse took, filling the air and sticking to his clothes and skin. His throat grew dry, but he kept riding. He passed old fences that had fallen years ago, and abandoned cabins that told stories of people who once tried to live here, but failed. As hours passed, doubt started to whisper in his mind. What if he found nothing? What if he returned too late? He pushed the thoughts away and focused on the road ahead. The child's face came to his mind, small, pale, and helpless. That was enough to keep him moving. By midday he reached the edge of land he had never crossed before. He knew the stories. People talked about this place in low voices, warning others to stay away. It belonged to people who lived differently, who knew the land in ways settlers never did. He had no reason to go there, no business being there, but desperation does not listen to warnings. He guided his horse forward, feeling fear mixed with hope in his chest. The land changed slowly. The ground became softer, the air cooler. Small trees appeared, and then, to his surprise, he heard water. The sound was gentle and steady, like a quiet song. He followed it, his heart beating faster, until he saw a narrow river shining in the sunlight. Near the water, goats moved calmly, drinking and grazing. And beside them stood a woman. She was kneeling by the river, washing herbs, her movements calm and careful. Her long dark hair was tied back, and her eyes lifted as soon as she sensed him. She did not jump or run. She simply stood and looked at him, studying him like the land itself was watching through her eyes. The cowboy stopped his horse and removed his hat slowly, showing respect without knowing why. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the river flowing and the goats breathing. He felt suddenly small, like a child standing before a teacher. "I'm sorry," he said at last, his voice dry and unsure. "I don't mean no trouble." She said nothing, but her eyes softened just a little. He swallowed and tried again. "I came looking for milk," he said. "For a baby. I don't have any left." The words felt heavy, like he had carried them all this way just to lay them down here. He waited for anger, for rejection, for her to tell him to leave. Instead, she looked at him more closely, noticing his tired face, his worn clothes, and the way his hands trembled slightly as he held his hat. "How old?" she asked quietly. "Only a few months," he replied. "Too small to go without." The woman looked toward the goats. then back at him. For a long moment she seemed to be listening to something deeper than his words. Then she nodded once. "You are far from home," she said.
"I know," he answered, "but I didn't know where else to go." She motioned for him to follow.
Relief hit him so hard that his legs nearly gave out. He led his horse closer while she filled a small clay container with fresh milk. The smell alone made his eyes burn. He hadn't realized how desperate he was until that moment. When she handed him the container, he held it carefully, as if it were made of glass. "Thank you," he said, his voice breaking. "You don't know what this means." She looked at him, her face calm but kind. "You should go back quickly," she said. "The child will be waiting." He nodded, unable to speak. He placed the container safely in his bag and climbed onto his horse. As he turned to leave, he glanced back. She was already kneeling by the river again, as if the moment had passed like a breeze. The ride home felt shorter, though the sun was beginning to fall. Hope pushed him forward. When he reached the cabin, the baby was crying, weak but alive. His hands shook as he warmed the milk and fed the child slowly. The baby drank, eyes closed, hands curling and uncurling, and for the first time in days, the crying stopped. The cowboy sank onto the floor, his back against the wall, tears rolling freely down his face. He didn't try to stop them. He didn't need to. That night, as the baby slept peacefully, he stared at the ceiling, thinking of the woman by the river. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her story. But he knew one thing. If he had not met her, this cabin would have been silent forever. The next morning came quietly. The sun rose slow and soft, spreading light across the land like a promise. Inside the small cabin, the baby slept longer than usual. The cowboy watched closely, afraid to blink, afraid the peace might break. When the baby finally stirred, the cry was weaker than before, but it was there, and that was enough to make his heart feel lighter. He warmed the last of the milk and fed the child carefully, just as the woman by the river had shown him. The baby drank, paused, and then drank again. When the small hands reached out and touched his finger, the cowboy felt something shift inside him. It was not just fear anymore. It was hope. But hope alone would not last. He looked at the clay container and saw that it was nearly empty. The truth sat heavy in his chest. He would have to ride back. He waited until the sun was high before leaving. He wrapped the baby tighter in blankets, placed the cradle close to the fire, and spoke softly, promising he would return again. The horse seemed to understand, stepping forward with steady strength. This time the cowboy knew where he was going, but the road still felt long. Every mile was filled with worry. What if the woman was gone? What if she refused him this time? What if he brought danger to her door? The land slowly changed again as he crossed into the quiet valley. The air cooled, the dust faded, and the sound of water greeted him like an old friend. The goats were there, and so was the woman. She stood near a small fire, stirring something in a pot. When she saw him, she did not look surprised. It was as if she had been expecting him. "You came back," she said simply. He nodded.
"I had to. The milk helped."
"The baby is stronger today." She studied his face, seeing the relief, the fear, and the tiredness that had not left him. "Draven made me safe on a flat stone near the fire." He obeyed, feeling strange but safe at the same time. The fire crackled and the smell of warm herbs filled the air. "You are alone with the child," she said, not as a question, but as a truth. "Yes," he answered. "Since winter." She said nothing for a moment. Then she poured a little of the warm drink into a cup and handed it to him. He drank carefully. It tasted of earth and plants, strange but comforting. He felt warmth spread through his body. "I lost children too," she said quietly, her eyes on the fire. "Long ago. The land took them. Sickness took them. War took others." The cowboy didn't know what to say. He only nodded, his chest tight with feeling. For the first time since his wife had passed, he didn't feel like the only person carrying pain. She filled another container with fresh milk, more than before. "This will last longer," she said. "But not forever." He looked at her, understanding the meaning behind the words. "I don't know how to repay you." She shook her head. "You already do. You ride far for that child." Not all men would. Before he left, she walked with him to the edge of the trees. "Bring the child next time," she said. "The ride is long for you." "Longer for the baby if you wait too long." The words scared him, but they also felt right. He promised he would return. The ride home felt heavier, but not empty. When he reached the cabin, he fed the baby again, and the child slept deeply. That night, the cowboy sat near the fire, thinking. He thought of the woman's words, of the warmth in her eyes, and of the way she had looked at the child without fear. For the first time, he allowed himself to believe that he might not have to do this alone. 2 days later, he wrapped the baby carefully and placed the small bundle against his chest. The child made soft sounds, unaware of the journey ahead. The cowboy rode slowly, careful with every step. The land felt less cruel this time, as if it had softened. When they reached the river, the woman was there again, waiting. She stepped forward when she saw the baby, her face changing in a way he could not explain. She reached out slowly, gently touching the child's cheek. The baby opened its eyes and stared back, calm and quiet. "She knows," the woman whispered. "She knows she is safe." The cowboy felt tears rise again, but he did not hide them. He watched as the woman lifted the child with care, holding her like something sacred. The baby did not cry. Instead, she rested, breathing slowly, as if she had found something she had been missing. The woman sat by the river with the baby in her arms, humming softly. The sound was low and steady, like the water itself. The cowboy sat nearby, feeling a strange peace fill the space between them. For a long time they did not speak. They did not need to. That day, the woman taught him more: how to calm the baby, how to read the cries, how to feed without fear. She showed him herbs that could help with fever, and told him when to worry and when not to. Each lesson felt like a gift, something precious and rare. When the sun began to fall, he knew it was time to go. The woman wrapped extra milk and herbs in cloth and placed them in his bag. Then she surprised him. "I will come with you," she said. He looked at her, shocked.
"You don't have to." "I know," she said gently, "but the child needs more than milk."
"And you need help." The words hit him deeper than anything she had said before. He wanted to refuse, to protect her, to protect himself from hope. But he couldn't. He only nodded. They rode back together, slow and careful, the baby safe between them. The cabin did not look so lonely when they arrived. The fire was lit, the blankets were warm, and for the first time in a long time, the cowboy felt something he had almost forgotten. He felt like he was coming home. That night, as the baby slept peacefully, the woman sat by the fire and watched the flames dance. The cowboy sat across from her, unsure of what tomorrow would bring, but certain of one thing: this journey, which had started with a simple search for milk, was becoming something much more important. And deep in his heart, he knew their lives were now tied together in ways he did not yet understand. The cabin felt different the next morning. It was still small, still rough, but the air inside was warmer, fuller. The sound of the baby's breathing mixed with the crackle of the fire and the soft steps of another person moving through the room. The cowboy opened his eyes slowly, unsure for a moment where he was. Then he remembered. He was not alone anymore. The woman was already awake. She moved quietly, careful not to wake the child. She added wood to the fire, warmed water, and set herbs to dry near the window. She did these things as if she had always lived there, as if the cabin had been waiting for her. The cowboy watched from his bed, feeling both comfort and confusion. He had spent months doing everything alone, and now someone else moved through his space with calm confidence. When the baby began to stir, the woman was there before the cowboy could stand. She lifted the child gently, humming the same low song she had sung by the river. The baby relaxed at once, tiny hands opening and closing in the air. The cowboy felt a strange tightness in his chest. He had tried everything to bring that kind of calm, and yet it came so easily to her. "She listens," the woman said softly, as if reading his thoughts. Babies hear more than we think. The cowboy nodded. I wish I had known that sooner. You know now, she replied kindly. That is enough. The days that followed moved slowly, but they were full. The woman helped him clean the cabin, organize the small supplies, and fix things that had been broken for months. She taught him how to make the milk last longer, how to keep it safe, and how to mix herbs to help the baby sleep. Each lesson was simple, but it changed everything. The cowboy listened carefully, wanting to learn, wanting to do better. At night, when the baby finally slept, they sat near the fire and spoke in low voices. She told him about the land, about how her people followed the seasons, and how every river, stone, and tree had meaning. He told her about the winter he had lost his wife, about the long nights when he thought the baby would not survive, and about the fear that had lived in his chest every day since. They did not try to fix each other's pain, they only shared it, and somehow that made it lighter. The baby grew stronger with each passing day. The cries became less weak, the eyes more alert. Sometimes the baby would stare at the woman for long moments, as if trying to understand her face. When the woman smiled, the baby smiled back. The cowboy saw it happen one morning, and his heart nearly broke with both joy and sadness. But not everything was peaceful. The land outside the cabin was changing. One afternoon, while gathering firewood, the cowboy saw smoke far away on the horizon. It was thin and dark, rising into the sky like a warning. He stood still, listening. He could not hear anything yet, but he knew what smoke could mean. Travelers, soldiers, or people looking for land that was not theirs. That night, he told the woman what he had seen. She listened quietly, her face serious. The land is restless, she said. When many feet walk it, trouble follows. He nodded. I don't want to bring trouble to you. You shouldn't have to stay here. She looked at the sleeping baby and then back at him. I am already here, she said. And the child needs stability, not fear. The cowboy wanted to argue, but he could not. He had no answer to that. Still, the worry stayed in his mind, like a shadow that refused to leave. A few days later, strangers rode past the cabin. They did not stop, but they slowed, their eyes searching the land. The woman stood inside, holding the baby close, while the cowboy watched through the window, his hand resting near the door. When the riders finally disappeared, silence filled the air again. But it was a silence filled with tension, not peace. That evening, the baby cried longer than usual. The woman rocked her gently, whispering words the cowboy did not understand. Slowly the crying faded, and the baby slept. The woman looked tired then, older than before. The cowboy realized she was carrying more than she showed. You miss your people, he said quietly. She nodded. Every day, but I lost children once. I will not walk away from one again. Her words stayed with him through the night. The next morning, the baby reached out and grabbed the woman's finger, holding it tight. The woman froze. Her eyes filling with tears she tried not to show. She sat down slowly, letting the baby keep hold, as if afraid to break the moment. The cowboy watched, his throat tight. In that simple action, he saw something clear. This was no longer just help. This was a bond. From that day on, the baby began to call out when the woman left the room. The sound was small, but it was real. The woman would return quickly, lifting the child with a soft laugh. The cowboy felt a mix of relief and fear. Relief that the baby was loved. Fear that love could be taken away. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, the woman stood outside the cabin, looking toward the mountains. We cannot stay hidden forever, she said. He stood beside her. I know. They will come, she continued. And when they do, choices must be made. He wanted to ask what choices, but he already knew. The land was changing. Their small, quiet life was fragile, like glass. Still, when he looked back at the cabin, at the firelight inside, and at the baby sleeping peacefully, he knew one truth. Whatever came next, they would face it together. That night, As the wind moved through the trees and the stars filled the sky, the cowboy understood something that had taken him months to see. The woman had not only saved his child, she had saved him too. And though danger waited beyond the hills, inside the cabin there was something stronger than fear. The days grew quieter, but the silence no longer felt safe. It felt like the kind of quiet that comes before a storm. The cowboy noticed it in the way the birds flew away earlier than usual, and how the wind changed direction without warning. Even the baby seemed to sense it, sleeping lightly and waking more often at night. One evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, the woman stood at the door of the cabin, watching the land. Her face was serious, her eyes sharp. The cowboy followed her gaze and saw something moving far away. Small figures, slow but steady. Horses. "They're coming closer," she said softly. The cowboy felt his chest tighten. "How many?" "Enough to change things," she replied. That night they spoke quietly while the baby slept. The fire burned low, and shadows danced across the walls. The cowboy wanted to believe they could hide, that the land would protect them, but he knew better. The cabin was too close to the trail. Too easy to find. "You should leave before they arrive," he said to her. "Take the baby if you must. I can stay behind." She looked at him then, truly looked at him, and shook her head. "You think running alone is safer?" she asked.
"No."
"We stay together. That is how we survive." He had no words to argue. He only nodded, feeling the truth of her words settle deep inside him. The next morning they packed what little they had. The woman wrapped herbs, food, and milk in cloth. The cowboy prepared the horse and fixed the saddle so the baby could rest safely. Every movement felt slow and heavy, like time itself did not want to move forward. Before they left, the cowboy looked around the cabin. The walls held memories of pain and healing, fear and hope. He touched the doorframe one last time, unsure if he would ever return. They rode into the trees, moving carefully, avoiding open land. The woman guided them, choosing paths the cowboy had never noticed before. She knew the land in a way he never could, reading signs in the dirt and listening to the wind. The baby slept, unaware of the danger that followed them like a shadow. By midday, they reached higher ground. From there, they could see smoke rising near the cabin. The cowboy's heart sank. Someone had found it. "We were right to leave," the woman said quietly. He nodded, unable to speak. They continued riding until the sun began to fall. The baby woke and cried softly, tired and hungry. They stopped near a group of trees where the woman fed and calmed the child. The cowboy kept watch, his eyes scanning the land, his hand ready though he hoped he would not need it. That night, the cold settled in quickly. They made a small fire, hiding its light behind rocks. The woman sang softly to the baby, and the sound carried comfort through the dark. The cowboy sat close, feeling the warmth of the fire and the warmth of being near someone who understood this kind of fear. In the early morning they heard voices in the distance. The sound was faint but clear. Men were talking, laughing, unaware of how close they were. The cowboy's heart pounded. He looked at the woman, and she placed a finger to her lips. Slowly, silently, they moved away from the fire, lifting the baby and stepping into the trees. They walked for hours, sometimes crawling, sometimes stopping to listen. The baby stayed quiet, as if sensing the need for silence. The woman whispered words of comfort, her face calm even when the danger was near. By late afternoon, they reached a narrow pass between rocks. The woman stopped and looked at the path ahead. "Once we cross, they will not follow," she said. "They do not know this land like we do." They crossed carefully, helping each other, lifting the baby over the rough ground. When they reached the other side, the world felt different, quieter, safer. The cowboy sat down heavily, his legs shaking with relief. That night, they rested near a stream. The baby slept deeply, tired from the journey. The woman cleaned the child's face and smiled gently. The cowboy watched her, realizing how strong she was, how much she carried without complaint. "You saved us," he said. She shook her head. "We saved each other." The next few days were slow and hard. They traveled through land the cowboy had never seen. Thick trees, narrow valleys, and hidden water paths. The woman taught him how to move without leaving signs, how to listen before stepping, how to survive without being seen. He learned quickly, because he had to. One night, as they sat by the stream, the baby reached out again for the woman's hand, holding it tightly. The woman did not pull away. Tears filled her eyes, and she looked at the cowboy. "She has chosen," she whispered. The cowboy felt his chest ache, but not with fear, with understanding. "I want her to have a future," he said. "A real one." "So do I," the woman replied. They stayed there for several days, letting the danger pass. The land slowly became peaceful again. The birds returned. The wind softened. One morning the woman stood and said, "It is time." "Time for what?" the cowboy asked. "To stop running," she answered. They found a new place near the hills, hidden and strong. A place where water flowed clear and the land offered shelter. They began to build again, slowly, carefully. The baby laughed for the first time one afternoon, a soft, bright sound that filled the air and made both of them stop and listen in wonder. In that moment, the cowboy understood that fear had not won its core. The land had tested them, but it had also guided them. They had lost a home, but they had found something more important. They had found each other. The new land welcomed them in quiet ways. The hills rose gently around the small valley, and clear water flowed nearby, singing softly day and night. The trees offered shade, and the ground was strong enough to build a home. It was not easy, but it was safe. For the first time in many weeks, the cowboy slept without waking in fear. They worked slowly, one day at a time. The cowboy cut wood and shaped it with careful hands. The woman gathered plants, found clean water paths, and made the space feel alive. She knew where to place the fire so smoke would not travel far, where to plant small seeds, and how to read the signs of weather before it came. The baby watched everything with wide eyes, sometimes laughing, sometimes reaching out as if trying to touch the world itself. The cabin grew little by little. It was smaller than the old one, but it felt stronger. It was built with purpose, not just survival. Every piece of wood held effort, and every stone held hope. At night, they sat by the fire, sharing food and quiet stories. Sometimes they spoke of the past, but more often they spoke of tomorrow. The baby grew quickly. Her cheeks filled, her cries became louder, and her laughter became the sound that filled the valley. She learned to crawl on the soft ground, and when she fell, the woman was always there to lift her, and the cowboy was always there to smile. The baby began to call out sounds that were not words, but felt like them. When she reached for the woman, she felt safe. When she reached for the cowboy, she felt strong. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in soft colors, the cowboy sat outside and watched the woman teach the baby how to hold a small cup of water. The baby spilled most of it, and all three of them laughed. In that moment, the cowboy felt something deep inside settle. He realized he was no longer counting days in fear. He was counting moments of peace. But peace does not mean forgetting. The world beyond the hills still moved, still changed. One morning, the cowboy saw riders far away, moving along a distant trail. He felt the old worry rise, but it did not control him anymore. The woman stood beside him, her hand resting on the baby's back, and she nodded calmly. "We are not hiding now," she said. "We are living." The riders passed without stopping. The valley stayed quiet. The cowboy let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. Seasons passed, and the land changed color. The hills turned gold, then brown, then green again. The baby took her first steps between the two of them, holding one hand from each. When she finally walked alone, the woman cried softly, and the cowboy laughed until his chest hurt. One night, under a sky full of stars, the woman sat by the fire while the baby slept. The cowboy sat beside her, the flames lighting their faces.
"She is strong," the woman said. "Stronger than we know."
He nodded. "Because of you." She shook her head. "Because of love." The words stayed in the air between them. It was simple, but it held everything. The next day, the cowboy made a choice he had been thinking about for a long time. He carved a small symbol into the door of the cabin, a mark of family, not ownership. When the woman saw it, she touched it gently, her eyes full. "This is home," she said. "Yes," he replied, "for all of us." Years passed quietly after that. The child grew into a strong girl who knew the land like the woman did, and had the steady heart of the cowboy. She learned to listen to the wind, to respect the land, and to care for others. She knew she was loved, and that knowledge became her strength. Sometimes travelers passed through, and the cowboy helped when he could. He never turned away someone in need, remembering the day he rode out searching for milk. The woman watched him with a small smile, knowing how far he had come. One evening as the sun set low, the girl sat between them, holding their hands. "Tell me again," she said, "how we became a family." The cowboy looked at the woman, and she nodded. "It started with a long ride," he said softly, "and a simple need." "And it ended with a home," the woman added. The girl smiled, her eyes shining. The wind moved gently through the trees, and the valley glowed in the fading light. In that moment, the cowboy understood that life had given him more than he ever expected. Not just survival, but purpose. What began as a search for milk became the creation of a family that would last beyond land, beyond fear.